A very good evening. If we are heated with the contestations among political parties, maybe we go to the mountains so that we get a bit of refreshing air. But then being a first cohort of students to study political science in Bhutan without discussing a bit of politics, my lecturers, particularly of Sherapti, would be disappointed. So here and there, I'll try to mix politics of life among the valleys in Bhutan. Simply to manage expectation, this topic is not my PhD specialization. It is out of my sheer interest. Until October 2023, I have been using Samsung J7 Prime that I bought in Kuala Lumpur in April 2017. Somehow, when the battery got damaged, I could not find a replacement. And I had to shift, rather was compelled to move to iPhone. And it's very difficult to live and respond to the market dynamics. And this is where my interest in environment comes in. And the topic is also to reflect on the journey that I have come from, particularly in a village setting. So the topic is hidden values to protected areas. And herein, I will tell a story of Bhutanese. A fortnight ago, on 29th of December, Lungten Namgil, me, and 7 other Bhutanese, we went to a hike. I would like you to remember this word, hike, to Lake District. Those days, if my parents were to go in those areas with similar setting, perhaps they might use, or they might have used a different word, pilgrimage. And as we went, one of our friends, who is doing his master's at Portsmouth, so he was offering a libation by the lake and also on the top of the hills, as you could see. But what we don't see is, as this very picture, sorry, the laser pointer doesn't really point to that. We capture the person and the very scenic environment, not necessarily the prayer that is being recited here. And when I was informed that there would be refreshment served, back in Bhutan, in my village, if we were to know that there would be refreshment served, we would carry our own cups. And this cup I bought in October 2023 from a Chinese restaurant. Back in the village, I used to go with a cup that was kept by my late paternal grandmother. So it is those lifestyles. But in Thimphu, we would simply go out and expect that plastic cups would be served. It is comfortable, but then is it sustainable? And is it convenient for the environment? So my story resonates around those themes. And what I will do is, first, I will explain the sources or the genesis of Bhutan's environmental conservation ethics. Then second, there's no plain sailing. As we, for example, Bhutan wants to achieve high-income country by 2034. There is economic drive. So how do we strike a balance between? And herein, through case studies, I'll try to present how different institutions act, react, and what are the status of economic pursuits vis-a-vis economic drives. Then where has that Bhutan's environmental focus taken at the global level? Then what I see as what is the road before us. So there are essentially 3 sources or pillars, you could say. These are very loose terms that I use simply to give an analytical framework to understand. So from the socio-cultural perspective, by constitution, Buddhism is the spiritual heritage of Bhutan. But then prior to that, in most of the communities, we have deep-rooted spiritual practices associated with the Bon. And that very person who offered libation and also burnt incense is also part and parcel. Of course, there is a very thin line between, or fine line between Buddhism and Burun practices. I see there is a very seamless transition from Burun to Buddhist tradition. And those spiritual aspects helped in imbibing values that are very consonant or very in sync with environmental ethics. And even from the linguistic expression, Bhutan's national anthem starts with Zuk Tendin Gepe. That means the land bristling with cypress. And country is known by different environmental related names such as Minjung Gekap. So Bhutan has been associated with these things. And even from the other cultural expressions, march dances, for example, where people go in large numbers, such as the dance of intermediate stage. So when people, when the two characters are prosecuted, so they are assessed, or their prosecution is based on their work or actions they have been doing. If it was in sync with spiritual values, for example, environmental values, if one took more lives or killed animals, then he or she faced more penalty. So these expressions, spiritual, both in Bon and Buddhism, and also linguistic expressions, have deep influence in our environmental values. However, as I say to my Bhutanese friends, today, Thimbusechi is very popular. But then among young Bhutanese, Northern Lam is more popular than Tendethang, where people go for to visit march dances. Then this is where the concept of hidden valleys come. And also there are association of sacred texts in, for example, Mimbar Tso, Burning Lake. And people, when people are aware about those existence of this text, people don't pollute or leave people behind. But then when we do not have that understanding, and here in the concept or the use of word or terminology, pilgrimage and hike comes into play. The second component is, of course, that was very much efficacious or effective when scientific materialism didn't really pick up. But then perhaps maybe as Bhutan opened up, focus on science, technology, and also the influence of enlightenment, reasoning ran deep in us, then everything needs to be seen, verified. But in those spiritual practices, you cannot really do it. So it is against this backdrop that political will was translated into legislative instruments, and this is where the protected areas comes in. So Forest Act was one of the first, if not the first, act passed in Bhutan from all laws in 1959. And Chimjing Chenmo, the first mother law, which is equivalent to constitution in Western sense of the word, has provision on forest. And gradually it opened up, and by constitution, 60% of forest land should be under forest cover. Today we have 69%. And within that, protected areas are very much part of our conservation efforts. Now, one might have very tall claims or tall vision, but then how do we sustain those efforts? Financing mechanism. In 1991, Bhutan had established Bhutan Trust Fund for Environmental Conservation, the first of its kind in the world, with a mission to have $20 million. Now it has a surplus over $70 million. And Bhutan for Life program is also there, which is a financing mechanism to protect protected areas, particularly to protect endangered species. So it is the combination of socio-cultural beliefs, linguistic expressions, and political will supported by finances that enable Bhutan to conserve environment. However, there is no plain sailing in environmental efforts. There are compromises or trade-offs to be made. So in the next 2 to 3 slides, I'll try to tease you. I'll not delve deeper, which we may, if you are interested, we can discuss later, on 3 areas as to how environmental ethics collide or are seen to be compromising economic drive, and that there's a clash between the two. So first, on zero waste Bhutan by 2030, the Shingkhar-Gorgan highway, it's related to high, infrastructure development and shifting cultivation, very much related to agriculture and economy. So first, waste. One would see waste, including plastics, along the trails to sacred sites. In 2014, a Canadian tourist made a very said remarks that Bhutan hasn't really learned from the West, that littering has been, littering are there almost in every places that are supposed to be sacred. This waste, it is more common, or it is more visible in urban centers such as Thimphu and Phuntsholling. And to align with our environmental goals, the third government launched Zero Waste Bhutan. But then it is not to say that two previous governments didn't do it. The first democratically elected government, one of the first initiative was enactment of Waste Management Act. The second government, the Prime Minister gave the TED talk, and also started Bhutan for Life. So of course there were different pathways, but then alignment as to emphasize the importance of environment was also always there and has been there, and I see that continuity. Second, on infrastructure, Shingkhar-Gorgan highway, it would link two areas from Bumtang to Lhunse. Right now, if you see the map, to travel to Lhunse, one will have to go to Mungar, then come back to Lhunse. So if the Shingkhar-Gorgan highway was was approved and constructed, it would reduce transportation by 100 kilometers. And Chumsengla, it is a very frosty area, and sometimes one would have to spend days because of snow. And it would also save people's time, resources. However, if that road was to be cleared, it had to be passed through Chumsengla National Park, 18 kilometers of road. So here was a clash. All three governments, political parties who came to power, first government 2008 to 13, second government 2013 to 18, third government 2018 to 23, promised that Shingkhar-Gorgan road would be paved. However, neither of the parties could not. Couldn't do it. Could do it. So herein, the setup of the institutions are important. There is an independent autonomous National Environment Commission, and legislative arrangements are such that every project, major project, needs to have environmental clearance. And that very highway didn't get that clearance. And the interesting fact is that during the fourth parliamentary elections, there were 4 political parties. None of the political parties had this in the pledge. Of course, there is economic cost, but then that environmental aspiration or commitment reigned over economic pursuit. The third, very much related to economy, is Bhutan's ban or stopping shifting cultivation. Simply to give a context, one time, 75% of household requirements were made from the shifting cultivation. I have faint recollection, very vivid recollection of me going to guard monkeys when my parents planted or grew millet in that through shifting cultivation practices. The case here is such that, as I was pointing it earlier, including Forest Act and also Chimjung Chenmo, or the first equivalent to Supreme Constitution of Bhutan, in 1970s, 80s, gradually shifting cultivation was restricted and later phased out. So the cost here is, and sometime into early 2000, of 32% of cultivable land were under shifting cultivation. And among that, particularly in the East, it was very popular. And people were concerned that if shifting cultivation has to be discontinued, it might have to come about with economic cost in terms of food production. So as of today, Bhutan imports rice equivalent to 3 billion ngiltam a year. And by in 2021, the total food import was equivalent to US dollar 11 billion. But then we didn't allow shifting cultivation. And these sacrifices are made or addressed through practice of intensive agriculture. And also government prioritized budget in the areas that are most affected, particularly in the Eastern region, so as to make up for the compromises people had to face. And these sacrifices, compromises, and trade-offs have enabled Bhutan to pursue a global vision, or at least make a global statement that environment or conservation of environment is the need of the hour. Last year, 2024, was the hottest year. And climate change is the main issue driving international political movement or international public policy discourse. So in 2015, then current Prime Minister, he was also Prime Minister during that time. So he gave that TED talk, and in 8 years' time, it gained 3.6 million. For a country of 700,000 population, and particularly when youth are not necessarily or easily interested in politics, and we have huge number of people who do not necessarily have access to these videos, 3.6 million is quite impressive. And come March 20, we will be celebrating at least maybe creating International Happiness Day created to Bhutan. And it started with Bhutan's proposal or resolution in the United Nations General Assembly, proposing that happiness towards a holistic development is a need of the world. And that culminated into a plenary high-level panel on well-being. And that well-being later recommended that 20th March be adopted as World Happiness Day. And not only UN adopted, number of countries, including New Zealand, adopted well-being budget. It has influence in Ecuador as well. So this environmental stewardship helped gain Bhutan's prominence in global leadership, and in a way also able to make certain bold moves around sustainability. Now, where do we see now? As I was saying earlier, we have economic dreams too. As Namja was saying that 9% of Bhutanese are outside of globalization. These are primarily driven by economic needs. Now, can uncompromising stand on environment take us where we want as a country? So there are, as I see it, there are 4 pathways to balance economic needs with environmental ethics. First, market liberals. They focus that economic development should be given utmost importance. As people become richer, they would be able to afford more and have cleaner environment. They cite countries such as Japan, United States of America, perhaps UK also, that how people, particularly in affluent societies, are able to live healthy life. Then institutionalists, they pursue quite similar, but then focus on institutional partnership, such as United Nations Environment Program, how institutional collaboration would translate into driving economic growth as well as conserving environment. Bioenvironmentalists, they are more of physiocrats who believe in physical science, that Earth has limited carrying capacity and that Earth cannot really absorb more. And in a way, they recommend population control as one of the mechanisms to reduce pressure on environment. And social greens, they are more radical. One can relate it to Gandhian vision of village republic, that international political economy derived among, that is run along market. It promotes inequality, and this isn't really helpful for the poor. And for that reason, promoting local economies perhaps would be one solution to promote economy as well as conserve environment. So this is it.